Hello, check this wall. It looks Cyclopean, right? And in a way it is, but only in the sense of being made with big blocks of stone cut to fit together, dispensing mortar. Because it is not Cyclopean in the other meaning of that word, that implies being old and built by some mysterious folks that are the stuff of legends. In fact, this wall was built just 250 years ago in the Basque country, Spain, and not over 3000 years before, near Greece, as the ones attributed to the one-eyed giants. Still, although separated by millennia from the mythical stoneworks, looking closely at this wall will reveal some unknown power they all have. Today's wall, actually a group of walls arranged in a star fort, is called the Fortaleza de Santa Engracia and sits on top of a gorge commanding both awesome views over the plains of Castile and the narrow passage into the Basque country, two regions of Spain that often do not get along properly. The location, known as the Pancorbo Gorge, is unsurprisingly a prime spot for both civil and military engineering, concentrating tunnels, railways, and also our Cyclopean star fort. Most people will not be captivated by this construction. But if you've been around this channel before, not only you are awesome, you know better. If not, if you just accidentally drop by, first of all, you are welcome. And please leave a like to appease the hungry YouTube spirits. And also, here's a brief overview of what you've been missing. Polygonal masonry, that's another name for Cyclopean walls, is a mysterious old construction style in which each stone is different and cut to fit the ones next to it, making the work quite complex, since the builders can only make one stone at a time. The extra work needed easily explains why people abandon the technique, but it does nothing to justify why they come up with the idea in the first place. Even worse, why they went on to repeat these works again and again from Peru to all over the Mediterranean coast. Some mysteries we will be a tiny bit closer to solve today. The fort of Santa Engracia seems to be in contradiction with what we know about Cyclopean walls. First of all, it is new, built in 1794, more than 2000 years after this type of construction went extinct in Europe. As all the Cyclopean walls, hundreds of cases spread from Portugal to Georgia, are dated, even by the most conservative academics, to before the 5th century BC, thus leaving Santa Engracia way out of time, like a dinosaur roaming in the middle of a cow herd. Secondly, the wall is properly defensive. The Spanish army built Santa Engracia for the War of the Convention against the French. That they lost. Not the French, the Spanish did. France had got their infamous revolution. So the crown heads of Europe were feeling shaky with the prospects of popular uprising. Thus, they, the royals, decided to try and cut the revolution short with this war and this fort. Then in 3, it was built in a rush. Sure, the stonework is not excellent, the fitting loose, and the stone blocks smallish, making it all much easier to build than the older massive boulders, apparently melted together, that we don't even know how they were done. Still, the builders of Santa Engracia were time pressured, because in 1794 the Spanish army was failing at containing the revolutionary French, and things would only get worse once Napoleon joined the party. Finally, in 4, the Fortaleza is a star fort, built with the most up-to-date plan of the time, with bastions and ditches, whilst using a construction technique that had been extinct for over 2000 years. See, by the 1700s, cannons were no longer a novelty in European wars. So the old-fashioned castles with tall walls and toothed battlements had been abandoned and replaced by a new design, the Star Fort, with thick and low walls and pointy sides, prepared for the impact of cannonballs. All to say that building Santa Engracia, a star fort with Cyclopean walls, should at least make us marvel at how these old constructions, built during the Bronze Age, had been ready to withstand cannon fire all along. The Pancorbo Gorge is the gate into the Basque country. And the Basques are a weird case. Short of being a self-ruled nation, they remain the most separatist people in Western Europe, having seen all sorts of empires come and go, whilst keeping alive a unique culture, including a strange language that has its closest parallel on the other end of Europe, in Georgia. It's like this. What we all speak today is part of a single family of languages known as the Indo-European, including all tongues from, you guessed it, Europe and India. This common thing, tongue, family of languages, got into Europe relatively late, from around 3000 to 1000 BC, replacing some unknown ancient speak that all went extinct, except for the Georgian Kartvelian and the Basque. Now, things get really exciting when we notice that many of the other lost languages that went kaput to accommodate the incoming Indo-Europeans, namely the Ibero, the Nuragic, the Hattian or the Pelasgian, they left us not proper words but massive Cyclopean walls. Yes, Cyclopean walls are to be found in places with remnants of an old lost pre-Indo-European language, thus making a strong case that Cyclopean builders were a culture united by a common family of languages, except for the party poopers Basques, that have these weird languages similar to Georgian but no Cyclopean walls, when everybody else from that time has both the walls and the strange language, leaving us with the Basque case, whereas they are speaking a Cyclopean language but don't have Cyclopean walls, whilst living in the Iberian Peninsula that has plenty of both. In Lusitania, that's on the west side of the peninsula, we can find some fancy works and a language that is suspiciously different from the incoming Celtic. In Andalusia, that's in the southern pointy bit, the Cyclopean towers are rough but proud, and they had two such languages, the Ibero and the Tartessian. In Catalonia, that's in the east more or less, they would also be speaking some sort of Ibero and have just 3 walls left, all of them very impressive nonetheless. And in the Balearic, that's the islands in the Mediterranean Sea, there are many incredible Cyclopean buildings, with whatever the people there were talking being uncertain. However, in the north, in the Basque country, that had all the reasons to build Cyclopean walls in due time, they have none of it. Well, there's one, Santa Engracia, but it was made only in 1794, too late for it to make sense. A key characteristic of the Cyclopean walls is that they dispense with mortar, not using some glue to secure the stones together. This drives some people to imagine the walls are older than mortar, and that it was the invention of such mortar that was mortal to the Cyclopean technique. But no, mortar is way older, as old as anything ever built. Göbekli Tepe, now famed as the oldest big building the world has ever seen from 12,000 years ago, is literally paved with mortar, a type called terrazzo, that despite the fancy name is relatively basic to mix. Even simpler and also older are the plain uncooked mortars made out of clay, mud and even cow dung. It is such a primitive solution that it is as old as building itself, likely 100,000 years old. When Cyclopean walls finally show up in the Bronze Age, the people had long moved on from the cow and mud and even the terrazzo phases, and were regularly making non-hydraulic mortar, a commonplace material often found in the earliest city remains. Then, by the time the Romans show up with their amazing cementum, Cyclopean works had gone basically extinct. And it makes sense, because the Roman concrete was kind of awesome. Sadly, the recipe for the Roman concrete was lost with the fall of the empire. Still, the cathedral builders did not resume Cyclopean works. Rather, they went back to the basic non-hydraulic stuff that had been commonplace since the Neolithic, taking it all the way until the invention of hydraulic lime mortar in 1756, as the Industrial Revolution kicked in and some inventive chemists came up with ever new and better binders for construction, enabling a bunch of new building types, including the star forts. Okay, I'm sorry. I promise I'm not trying to bore you to death with this mortar stuff. But let me just point out that making the very thick walls capable of withstanding cannon fire using the old non-hydraulic mortars was a bad idea, because that ancient paste would remain wet inside the thick, dump-like-a-truck walls, causing them to collapse. Now let's meet the real Cyclops, the last builder of Cyclopean walls. His name is Fermín de Rueda, and was born in the Spanish city of Salamanca in the year 1744. We don't have any pictures of him, so we could not confirm the high patch, but he should have one, because obviously he was a Cyclops. All we know is that he was the top military engineer in Spain in 1793, when the Minister of Defense, desperate to contain the revolutionary French, resorted to the likely only competent man at his service, and commanded him to build a fort blocking the passage from the Basque country into the plains of Castile. This was a daunting task. The country was broke, the military in shambles, and the incoming French seemed unstoppable. Also, it should be impossible to build a star fort without the necessary non-hydraulic mortar. That was too scarce and expensive at the time. The solution Fermín de Rueda found was pure genius, proving that Cyclopean walls can resist cannon fire, whilst dispensing the fancy new non-hydraulic mortar. How he thought of that, I don't know. But this is what I like to think it happened, and it could be true. Fermín spent many years in South America, in Venezuela, and could have heard of the distant Peruvian works. More close to home, he was born and raised in Salamanca, which is on the west side of the peninsula, in an area once known as Lusitania. Being a curious kid with a fascination for construction, he could have visited the old Cyclopean wonders around his hometown, such as Yecla la Vieja, Merchanas or Ulaca. admiring the ingenuity of the original builders and their ability to create massive walls that can resist time, water, earthquakes, and now we know, even cannons. Here's the thing. Hundreds of star forts were built all over the world during the 18th and 19th centuries, and no other one resorted to this mysterious and extinct construction technique. We don't know what inspired Fermin de Rueda, the last Cyclops, because this is yet another mystery of polygonal walls. Their superior strength is not apparent at first sight. It is not at all evident that building a wall with odd-shaped stones will result in exceptional resistance, even to cannon fire, thus making me think that there is a link between the builders, whereas the idea, experience and know-how had to be transmitted from one person to the next. Stranger still is realizing that the idea spread despite no one ever had written about building them, as the walls are all pre-writing, something we'll need to investigate later. That's it for today. Hope you liked it. Keep an eye on the comments.